Hello and welcome to the Church of the Holy Family of Nazareth of Aghintain. This is one of the first churches built after the penal times in Ireland. It is the site of what we believe would have been a mass rock and a hedge school. Philip McMahon, who by the way is buried in Clogher Cathedral, was one of the last penal priests. He died in 1795. He left money in his will for 3 churches to be built. This church, Escra and the 4th chapel. This church was built by Father Patrick Bellew, who was the curate in Clogher at the time. He lived in the cottage at Tulnavert, just at the wedding tree where Carlton talks about in his stories. The first reference of Aghintain Chapel being built we can get from Father McKenna's parishes of Clogher. It says, in an obituary notice of Q McCaffrey of Town, who died 25th November 1878, aged 82, it is stated that he was at the opening of Aghintain Church in the year 1816. Q McCaffrey was a draper in Town. There was no churches in this area until Aghintain was built. Everybody came out from the town and came from the surrounding town lands down from the mountain to attend Mass here. At first, it was a simple thatched building, and we know this due to Father James Nolan's diary entries, which I have recently uncovered and gives me the whole history of the church. As you can see, Father James Nolan was the parish priest in Aghintain, Town from 1934 to 1964. Out of interest, he was also a World War I chaplain and a prisoner of war. However, I have recently found his diaries thanks to the parish priest Father Gallagher allowing me entry to the stables in Town. In this, I found that Father Nolan had recorded the complete history of Aghintain Chapel by talking to the older people. You can see his little diagrams how Aghintain was first a little thatched building. It was originally a thatched chapel at Aghintain. We can see the ground plan inside the current church. It was a lot smaller. However, who originally built the chapel, we don't know, but in 1862, Aghintain was then improved by, it says, the Hagen brothers of Escra, who built this chapel as we see it now. Originally, this stained glass window did not exist until the 1930s, when the next improvement of the chapel began. The stained glass was installed by Peter and his brother Joe, and on the day it was installed there was a bit of a palaver as they actually broke the head of St. Joseph. They were in absolute panic as the bishop was due next week to consecrate the church and the new window. However, a new head was found for St. Joseph and all ended well. Set within the older altars of the chapel is a relic of a saint. You can see that this lifts out, and this is a piece of marble with the relics of a saint, we're not sure whose are in here, are set within the marble. When the priests did the Stations of the Cross around people's houses, they took this with them. When they came to kiss the altar, they were not actually kissing the altar, they were kissing the relics of a saint, which sits very neatly within the altar itself. This tree is known as the Titanic tree. This is folklore that's been passed down through generations. It came as a little sapling from America and was brought to one of the big houses in Aghintain. The girl who brought it home from America gave it to her mother. The sapling was then planted here to mark the death of a little boy. The little boy's mother had worked in the big house around Aghintain, and the lady of the house gave her a little piece of the sapling to mark his grave. It is said that this is known as the Titanic tree, as when the lady of the house's daughter was returning back to America, she took the ship, now known as the Titanic, back to America and unfortunately perished. So this is known as the Titanic tree and is one of our most famous bits of folklore. We installed this little cross in the summer of 2025 to commemorate the little babies who were buried in this area of the graveyard. It is unconsecrated, and the babies who were born and were unbaptised were buried here. However, there is also a grown man buried here who died in the early 1900s. He didn't pay his dues, so Canon Kelly said he was not being buried in the graveyard.